A year ago, President Donald Trump took over D.C. police, sent in the National Guard, deployed a law enforcement surge to the streets of D.C. He said it would free the district.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. This is Liberation Day in D.C.
Not everyone was so eager to accept the president's help, but D.C. had no choice. Federal law ensures that.
I'm going to work every day to make sure it's not a complete disaster.
At the time, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser reminded the nation D.C. crime was at a 30-year low. The police takeover, it ended after 30 days, but the Guard and the law enforcement surge, they remain.
I'm sad to say it's feeling more normal than it used to, right? Yeah. And I don't necessarily give them a second thought now when I see them.
So what's the effect? Who's won, who's lost? Where are the battle lines drawn now? And after a year of troops on our streets and a law enforcement surge in our neighborhoods, what does the future look like? This is For More Context, your seat in the News 4 newsroom for a conversation about how we check facts, fight for answers, break stories, and hold each other accountable. How hard is it to believe it's been a year since those National Guard troops first rolled out onto D.C. streets?
I have to say on this one, it actually seems like it's been longer to me than a year. It's been such a big part of our coverage, and it's such a constant presence. And there have been so many different stories that, yeah, when I heard the anniversary date coming up, I was surprised that it's only been a year. It seems longer to me anyway.
This city will no longer be a sanctuary for illegal alien criminals. We will have full, seamless, integrated cooperation at all levels of law enforcement, and we'll deploy officers across the district with an overwhelming presence. You'll have more police, and you'll be so happy because you'll be safe. When you walk down the street, you're going to see police, or you're going to see FBI agents. We're going to have a lot of agents on the streets. You're going to have a lot of essentially military.
What do you think the effect has been overall? And then we'll ask a couple of specifics.
You know, I think this, I could argue round or flat, right? So certainly there are people who welcome it, that they see this as an added safety presence in their communities. They feel safer around in the presence, whether they're on Metro or at the park or on the mall. Certainly people from out of town, who really aren't familiar with the city, could feel safer because of their presence. Then the flip side to that are, particularly the DC residents, the longtime DC residents and district leaders who feel this is an assault on home rule, that this is overcorrecting, that it sends the wrong message to put the military in the streets of America, not just in Washington, D.C., right? We see this playing out across the country. That the questions get raised whether they really are making a positive impact on crime. Yeah. And so I think if you went out on the street, you'd get both answers.
What about, though, for you, D.C. born and bred, as you've said many times, how different does it feel to have the military on the streets of your hometown?
Well, I'm sad to say it's feeling more normal than it used to, right? And I don't necessarily give them a second thought now when I see them. What I have noticed about them is their posture since the tragedy where two Guards troops were shot, one killed, one critically injured.
An horrific start to the long holiday weekend in D.C. as the nation waits to learn if two National Guards members shot just steps from the White House will survive.
Right now, a suspect is in custody in connection to the gunfire.
It's noticeable when I see them traveling in groups that you see them, their situational awareness, that when they travel in a cluster of 4 or 5 or 6, people are looking in every direction, particularly when they're stationary at a corner. They no longer stand with their backs to anybody. They're very much aware of where they are.
How much interaction have you had with individual Guard members?
As a journalist, almost none.
Yeah, right.
As a journalist, almost none.
Not for lack of trying.
Right.
I mean, they just have sort of not been eager to do that.
The general who's in charge, when I see him at events, he doesn't dodge me. He'll stop and he'll talk to me, and I appreciate that.
I'm just wondering what you would want to tell residents of D.C. about your deployment here
You've obviously heard that some of them are not happy about it, particularly that they're armed. What's your message to residents?
Yeah, so remember, the DC Guard is composed of citizens from the community. We live here, we work here, we serve here.
As a citizen, as just an anonymous guy on the street, I find them to be open, like I say hello, right?
Of course.
I mean, look,
why not?
They didn't choose to be here,
right.
And I know it's uncomfortable for them. And so I usually give them a nod, a wave, a hello, how, whatever, how you doing?
Well, but let's talk then about the impact on crime, right? They are here as the safe part of the safe and beautiful effort, although they have done some beautification
right,
as well. Yeah. But I think the bigger part of their mission is the safety part. Where do you come down on when you talk to people about whether they have made DC safe?
So crime is going down in the district, right? And crime has been going down. As you and I talked about earlier, crime was going down before the surge, before the National Guard showed up. But crime has continued to go down. Certainly, the chief of police and even the mayor, Bowser, and the interim chief of police have said that the surge has helped. There's extra federal police presence and cooperation and coordination. And part of that surge are the National Guard.
Right.
Now, Mayor Bowser has said she doesn't want the National Guard in the city, but they haven't pushed back that strenuously. They continue to cooperate with them, sharing radio channels, helping in arrests. And so there have been studies, as you know, that show it's questionable whether they really have made a positive impact or not.
Violent crime reported to DC police so far this year is up slightly.
This was never about reducing crime, especially nonviolent crime. This has been a show of force without any evidence to bear that it's actually working.
Now, a new study from the Center for American Progress reports the National Guard hasn't done a thing to bring violent crime down. They do say one of the major things they've been able to do is to put Guard members where otherwise MPD would have to have officers, and that allows officers to be in maybe higher crime areas. The other thing the Guard said in a recent conference call was that they are aware every day of things their troops do to stop crime, but that they have not done a comprehensive analysis on their own to see whether their presence has brought crime down in DC. And as you point out, and as we pointed out, the academic studies suggest no. Is there any evidence they sped up a decline that was already in place?
No. So that's what we were specifically trying to look for. If there was an acceleration in that trend, these tests would have found that.
We asked the White House and the Guard about claims that crime in DC didn't drop due to their deployment, but they didn't answer that question. Instead, they told us President Trump has transformed our nation's capital from a crime-ridden city into a safe and beautiful haven for residents and visitors alike. But I wonder, on the money part, it's a lot. Some estimates say as much as $4 billion if the Guard stays here through the end of President Trump's term. And I wonder, does anyone tell you that money could be better spent in D.C.?
Yes, you hear that frequently, and particularly with this latest news that they are signing a nearly $300 million contract for housing for the National Guard.
Now the Trump administration is moving them into local apartments. The short-term rentals will cost the government nearly $300 million. The National Guard says the apartments cost half of what they've been paying for hotel rooms.
It's $292 million, nearly $300 million. To put that in perspective, MPD's annual budget is $599 million. So it's about half of the annual budget for the entire DC Police Department. And to say that money could, I think we all agree that, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that there are a lot of people who believe that money could be spent differently and better, particularly if you want to direct it just toward public safety here in the district.
On the housing piece, what does that do for a DC family looking for a decent apartment in our city when you're competing against the federal government for that apartment? So
look, Mayor Bowser has thrown hundreds of millions of dollars in her going on 12 years as mayor, and the district council has as well, for affordable housing. in the district, and it's one of the biggest concerns. It's one of the biggest issues in Washington, D.C., and again, in most big cities, is affordable housing, particularly for families and whatnot. When you throw in, somebody who's going to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at landlords, well, that impacts the market, and that's somebody that you're competing against.
Taken all together, $300 million in federal government money to house the National Guard in D.C. could make it harder for D.C. families to find a decent apartment.
There's logic to that, and then you just, if they're moving them to buildings where there are other residents in these buildings and perhaps voucher recipients in these buildings, think of then, if you're living in those buildings, what it's like living with the military walking in, because anybody who's been outside one of these hotels when there's a shift change knows they show up in these big convoys of vans. They get out, dozens of them at a time. They're carrying gear. They're in military fatigues. I'm sure they're the nicest guys and gals that you would want, to see and encounter. But it's just that perception and that image of now you're living in military housing, right? And that sense. So it's unsettling, and for all these reasons, I think the majority of DC residents and certainly district officials would like to see the Guard out of DC.
Look, DC is going to have a new mayor in a couple months. Mayor Bowser has made no secret of the fact she doesn't love the Guard, but I think has felt somewhat constrained on what she could do to fight them. Do you suspect that'll change when a new mayor gets to the Wilson Building?
Well, I don't suspect much will change with the National Guard because, as you perfectly explained there, the mayor has no control over the D.C. National Guard, unlike the governor of any state, which has control of their guard. D.C.'s unique position, not being a state, it is the Department of Army, the Secretary of Defense, and the president who ultimately controlled and deployed the D.C. National Guard. So,
with the exception of the mayor's bully pulpit.
Yes, and they can get up, but look, we saw as recently as this week the President of the United States in the Oval Office calling Janice Lewis George, the Democratic nominee and the odds-on favorite to be the next mayor of D.C., a communist.
President Trump once again today weighed in on local politics. Take a look on social media this afternoon. The president called the candidate a communist. He said that Janice Lewis George would destroy the city.
And once again, threatening to federalize either the police department and or the entire city, which the president, with the approval of Congress, can do. And this Republican Congress has shown an appetite to do just that. So those threats are very real. Janice Lewis George on the campaign trail and sitting right here in this news has said many times she will rescind the executive order that has the D.C. Police Department coordinating with immigration enforcement. She has indicated that she would also address the surge and the cooperation and the joint task force going in and out. And she can have some impact there. She can tell the Metropolitan Police Department what to do up until the president decides to remove that authority, which he has already done in this second term of his. But the National Guard, other than, as you said, making public statements, there's not much she can do. Now, look, both the president and Janice Lewis George have indicated they want to meet. They have not met at this point, but one would expect that they would, hopefully before she's sworn into office in early January. And this will certainly be one of the issues that comes up, but she'll be faced with the stark reality that, as the president is wont to say, you have no cards to play.
Right. We've talked a lot about the Guard. It comes part and parcel with the surge in federal resources, which also sort of is nearing this one-year anniversary. And I don't suspect that's going away. But what do you think the long-term impact of that is on trust in law enforcement, on trust in the D.C. government when they are cooperating, at least in some ways, with these
If you're talking about the entire surge impact, it's devastating.
The National Guard, the immigration enforcement.
It's a major setback. It already has been. I mean, with nothing else, just the immigration enforcement and whether whether it's perception and or reality, the level of cooperation. We know MPD has been cooperating with immigration enforcement now since the surge began.
Can you tell us what they're being arrested for?
It's none of your business. It was one of those incidents, many reported by News 4 last year, in which federal immigration authorities took someone into custody side by side with D.C. police.
Do you see who's watching you? These are children that you're doing this in front of.
There was shouting and videotaping, and at one point, this comment from a D.C. police officer.
Well, don't call 911 next time, then. See, I'll have such a problem.
So you can show up? So you can show up?
You have such a problem with us. Don't call 911 next time.
That, Daniela Anello thought went too far.
That was very puzzling to me because we've taught our kids over and over, if there's something harmful, dangerous, or scary, you call 911.
When we spoke with Daniela Anello about her experience that day, D.C. police declined to talk to us about the incident. But through a process with the Office of Police Complaints here in D.C., Anello did go through mediation with one of the officers and said she was pleased with the result. She did tell us, though, the whole thing has affected her trust in MPD, and that's something the mayor was nervous about on day one. On that point, MPD told News 4 months ago there is nothing more important to MPD than maintaining the trust of D.C. residents.
You see it and you see the outrage. And then, yes, with the surge and then with the National Guard. And look, the most recent video that we have of the National Guard are these Guard members who are arresting a woman in her backyard. She's now suing them over this. We don't know what happened before, but it certainly looks rough. What's going on. It's not a pretty picture that the Guard wants out there.
A veteran and outspoken critic of the National Guard's deployment in D.C. is suing over her arrest. Anna King says that she was injured on May 8th when 3 National Guard members arrested her for allegedly assaulting other Guard members days before. In a statement to News 4, spokesperson for the National Guard's Joint Task Force D.C. said that it is aware of the legal claim. The statement went on to say that Guard members recognized King from the alleged assault, detained her, and notified D.C. police, who responded and made the arrest.
This is going to have long-term effects on the trust between the public and young. Think if you're a young person, right? Think if you're growing up and this is like your norm as a teenager playing out in the streets. This is going to be your impression of not just law enforcement, but the military as well. Look, I'm a kid of the 60s. I was growing up during the riots here in D.C., and I have vivid memories of troops in the streets in front of our home, tanks and jeeps and armed military, and fires and the civil unrest. That's what this generation of kids, those are going to be their memories as they grow up.
After the riots had ended, the troops rolled off our streets, and for many years they weren't there. And I wonder, do you suspect this ends when a new president takes residence in the White House?
Well, I think it depends on whether it is a Democrat or Republican who takes office, who occupies the White House. I think regardless, it'll probably be, we'll start to see it scale down, even if it is a Republican, for a number of reasons, because you may see some different governors around the country and different sentiment and whatnot. But if President Trump were to remain in office, I don't think we'll see any change, right? And that's something that, I know seems crazy and ridiculous to a lot of people, but there are a lot of people who it doesn't seem so crazy and ridiculous to. So, and we're in just uncharted waters. So we really do have to be prepared for the possibility of anything here.
As Mark and I discussed, the Guard is now expected to remain on the streets of D.C. at least to the end of President Trump's current term, and that's January of 2029. There were as many as 5,000 here around the July 4th holiday. That number is dropping and could drop by half before it's all done. But Senator Elizabeth Warren said recently that extra cost will be $1.4 billion based on a Pentagon estimate, and that's borne by all Americans. The questions we'll continue to ask is what's the cost and benefit for those of us who call D.C. home? If you like this kind of context, and we sure hope you do, there's an awful lot more of it to check out on the NBC Washington YouTube page. Like it, subscribe to it, tell us what you think about it in the comments. Meantime, I'm Ted Oberg from the News 4 I-Team, and I'll be here working for you.